Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Tiamat and today I have for you a recent reads video. So I'm going to talk you through 10 books that I have read recently. Some of them not so good, but 6 that I would highly recommend that you just pop straight on your TBR. So let's talk about the books, shall we? And unfortunately I'm going to start with the DNF. So the book that I DNF'd was Elephant Herd by Guixing Zhang, translated by Rojas. So this is one that I actually predicted for the International Booker, and it sounded so good. It sounded like Gemma Catnip. It's set in the Malaysian jungle, and it's following a young boy who's hunting for his uncle, who is sort of part of a like a guerrilla group, I believe. And I just thought it sounded really interesting, looking at Malaysian politics and like the Malaysian jungle as a setting. I just thought that sounded fantastic. But I mean, I think I got about 20% into this one and quickly discovered that it was not my jam. So it read very fever dream-esque, if you know what I mean. So I sort of always felt a little detached from the narrative, and I mean, I got 20% in and the boy still hadn't left his home. He was still at home. And it had talked about his grandparents and his siblings a little bit. But it all just felt a little laboured. And then it really got into like some bodily fluid side of stuff. I think there was something to do with a poo down a well. To be honest, it was a while ago I read it. But at that point I was like, no, I am out. It wasn't fast-paced enough to me, and the writing style was too transient, I suppose. It just didn't really work for me. So unfortunately, Elephant Herd got the DNF. I mean, not much of an improvement, but the next book that I read was Gladys Aylward, The Little Woman, or in the UK the book is known as My Missionary Life in China. And this was a book that's on my 100 book bucket list, which is here. And I read this book with the fabulous Dia at Novel Idea. I had no idea really what this book was about before I went into it, apart from the fact that it was about a woman called Gladys who led a missionary life, alas, in China. And the book very much did what it said on the tin. It's a non-fiction account written by Gladys Aylward. Sorry if this keeps moving. Rudy's on the sniff. He's on the sniff down there. But this woman clearly had many talents. She was a very courageous woman. She moved from Britain to China via train through Russia. I think it was in the early 1900s. I can't quite remember. But at a very sort of politically difficult time. I think it was before the wars. And her story in itself was very interesting. This young woman who saved up money and she felt like she had this calling, and she went to China and she learned Chinese. Really, stop scratching on my... And the life that she made for herself there, she adopted lots of children, or set up like an orphanage effectively for lots of children. She was very brave. She went through a lot of stuff. For all her merits, Gladys Aylward is not a writer. That does not sit in her talent box. It was as if this book was written by a child for a child. There was no build in this. This was probably the worst non-fiction book I have ever read in my entire life. It was so simplistic that I literally think my 5-year-old could have read and understood it. It was bad. I haven't seen writing that bad in a long time. I mean, I would even put books like Ice Planet by Barbarians above this in terms of writing prowess. So yeah, this woman lived a very interesting life. Not debating that. I do have feelings on missionaries, which I'm not going to go into, but she seemed like a nice woman who was trying to do nice things, but she can't write, so she should not have written this book about herself. 1 star. Next up, we have a children's book, Cobweb by Michael Morpurgo. I read this to my youngest child, Charlie, and I've read several Michael Morpurgo books at this point. Warhorse is obviously one of his more famous ones. I don't like his writing style. I find him really dull. And this book in particular was about a dog called Cobweb who sort of gets kidnapped and ends up herding sheep and cattle across from, I believe, from Wales to London, where they sort of, around the time that Napoleonic Wars are ending, and he comes across the French drummer boy, which is a true story. And so we follow this dog as he's sort of negotiating his own life and this Napoleonic War, or the return of the soldiers from the Napoleonic War. Okay, interesting concept. I don't think it was very, I don't know, I didn't think it was great for children. I mean, potentially it was aimed at children older than my 5-year-old for sure. But even if I was reading it to a 9-year-old, I think they still would have been bored. I was bored. And I love historical fiction and I love dogs. So, yeah, I gave it 2 stars. I think that will be the last time I attempt a Michael Morpurgo book. Unfortunately, he is just not an author for me. Obviously a very, very famous author, very prolific author. He does very well. Lots of other people like him. I'm just not one of them. Next, in 7th position, we have Clean by Alia, Trabucco, Zerrain, translated by Sophie, Hughes. And this is a really interesting book. This is told from the perspective of a maid, and she is being interviewed by the police following the death of a child in the home where she works. And so all through this you have this very unreliable narrator told almost in like a stream of consciousness vibe, as we sort of unpick how this woman came to work for this family and her relationship with the parents and the girl and what happened to this girl and how she died. And all the time you're just sort of wondering what happened. And it's one of those books that leaves you wondering afterwards. You never get like this solid conclusion. You have to sort of make your own mind up based on the testimony that this woman has given, what you believe. And I found it really engaging. I have seen some more negative reviews of this, but I was really sucked into this woman. I thought she had a really strong narrative voice. She does wander and what word am I looking for? Meander? That's the word I'm looking for. Sort of through the narrative, and she goes off on tangents, but ultimately I found her really intriguing as a central character and as a narrator. And yeah, I still think about her as a character now, and I read this book quite a while ago now because I'm very far behind on my recent reads. But she's definitely a character that sticks with you, and I still don't know what I believe and what I don't believe. So that's where I sat with that one. I gave that 4 stars. I would highly recommend. It's sort of literary thriller, so if that is your jam, then I would recommend giving it a go. It's quite interesting. Next up, we have Private Rites by Julia Armfield. So I loved Julia Armfield's debut novel, Our Wives Under the Sea. And so when she brought out a new one, Private Rites, last year, I bought it immediately and only just got around to reading it at the beginning of this year. And this is a climate fiction book. And I would say if you've read Our Wives Under the Sea, you will know that what Armfield does really well is create this sort of unsettling, uncomfortable atmosphere, and that is absolutely present in Private Rites as well. We are set in a city where basically it rains like all the time, so it's like flooded. People tend to get boats to places. Like if it doesn't rain for like an hour, this is like a major event. It just rains all the time. There's water everywhere. And we follow 3 sisters following the death of their father as they sort of try to wrap up his estate so to speak. He was a famous architect, and they are sort of clearing out his house, finding out like who's inherited what. Two of the sisters come from one mother and one of the sisters comes from a different mother, and we sort of unpick their past, and we sort of see some rather unsettling memories that some of these girls have of sort of rituals and stuff that were performed when they were children. And it all comes to like quite a big climax at the end. And I really enjoyed all three perspectives. So you get the different perspectives all the way through. They are very unique and different. Each girl has their own vibe and their own baggage, right, from the childhood that they grew up in, and you sort of see that manifesting in their behaviours as adults. And it's so clever how Julia Armfield does this. I wouldn't be surprised if she is like a psychologist or something on the side, because she really understands human nature and how different sort of experiences may influence different behaviours as you grow through them, and I thought that was really, really interesting to read. So highly recommend. I would say I didn't know it quite as much as Wives Under the Sea. I gave that book 5 stars. I gave this one 4, but I would still say it's absolutely worth your time, and you should give it a read. Next up, I had the 8th book in the Expanse series, Tiamat Wrath by James S.A. Corey. So I've been reading the Expanse series for a while. I am actually currently reading the final one. I'm reading this with a lovely group of people: Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Sarah from Freshly Read Books, and Fraser Simons. And yes, book 8 was fabulous. Book 7 left on a bit of a cliffhanger, and so we were thrown sort of right back into the action. Some significant plot points happen in book 8. I cannot tell you anything about them because it's book 8, but broadly we are set in space following a crew of a ship, the Rocinante, and it's multiple perspectives. So in every book, this one is the same. We usually follow 1 or 2 crew members and then 1 or 2 people who are outside the crew, so that we get this like panoramic view of the world and the politics that are happening. And in the first book, a proto-molecule is introduced into sort of the solar system as we know it, and causes some issues. And this sort of alien power sort of grows through the books, and we sort of see how humanity, or not just humanity, but the people of this world fight each other, and how power plays a part, and how this sort of dark force, this alien force, no one quite knows what it is, but they're trying to use it to their advantage to get power. And it's very politically complex but excellent. If you like political, you are going to like this, and it is action packed. Like, all of the books have been very action packed. There is always some sort of peril about to beset the crew, and yeah, it's fantastic. So this was one of my favourites of the series so far. I gave it 4.5 stars. If you haven't read Expanse yet, what are you waiting for? Next up, I have another book in the series, and that is Lirael by Garth Nix, which is the second in the Old Kingdom series. So I read this with Sandy again from Miss Reads a Lot, Dia from Novel Idea, and Jack from Spread Bookjoy. We also read Sabriel together, which is the first in this series. And Lirael was brilliant. I was really just in the mood for good, fast-paced fantasy. This is a YA fantasy series, but I would say it's like top-notch YA. I quite often don't like YA. This I loved. Lirael, the titular character, is who we are following. She is a daughter of the Clare, and the Clare are people who are sort of clairvoyant, but Lirael doesn't have the power of clairvoyance, and she's getting older and older, and she's not getting this power, and she feels really isolated. And what Garth Nix does well is he creates this teenage character who in some ways we sort of sympathise with and relate with, because she's got this feeling of otherness and you kind of want to help her. She's sort of on her own, her parents aren't about, but in other ways you see her sort of naivety and her sort of hormonal adolescence coming through and overreacting to things. And I think he painted the picture of a teenage girl really, really well. And then we go through and Lirael starts to discover things about herself, and the book goes from there. I don't want to go too into it because I think it's fun to explore for yourself. I would say there is an excellent animal sidekick, an animal companion in this book, which I think would go down as one of my absolute favourite side characters of all time, the disreputable dog. And I just felt like the world that Garth Nix created in this was fantastic. I would also say you can see the growth from Sabriel to Lirael. You can see the growth in Garth Nix writing, his ability to build worlds, build characters. I very much enjoyed Sabriel, but Lirael is definitely a big step up. It is half a book. It's half a book, because the final book, Abhorsen, really could... Lirael and Abhorsen could be one book. They don't really need to be two separate books. Whereas Sabriel is its own contained story. So, yeah. I loved it, and I would highly recommend to anyone who fancies a bit fast-paced, excellently written, beautifully crafted fantasy to give these ones a go. Okay, and the next 3 books were all 5 stars for me, so yeah, get your pens and pencils out, girls and boys. The first of my 5 stars is a poetry collection. Who am I? And kudos for this has to go to the fantastic Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe. I saw her talk about this and I just immediately picked up the audiobook, which is available on Everand, and listened to it, and she was bang on the money. This is a... Did I even tell you what it's called? It's called Forest of Noise by Mosab Abu Toha, who is a Palestinian author, and he is sort of writing about his time in Gaza as sort of... So the poems are about his experiences in Gaza, but I think he really started writing these poems around the time that his house was bombed and he was forced to flee. But he sort of goes back in time to previous conflicts in Palestine, and he's talking about his children and like the world around him, and like I think one of the things that stuck with me was the sadness of memories, when you can remember happier, beautiful things and now they're just ashes, and you really get that sadness come through these poems. They are fantastic. I'm not a poetry reader. I would say this is entry level poetry. If you want to try some poetry, I would say this is a good place to start. But yeah, it really, a lot of these poems touched me, and I'm so glad that Olivia put it on my radar because it was outstanding. The next book I have is probably one most of you have read, but it's another one that I read to Charlie, my 5-year-old, and that's The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. And I've read this several times, at least 3. I read it as a child, I read it to my eldest son Sam, and now I've read it to Charlie. And it doesn't get old. Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Lion and the Scarecrow going on their adventure. I think I almost forget. I remember the beginning part really strongly every time I read this. Dorothy landing in Oz, finding these creatures, they go to Oz. And then I kind of forget about what happens after they get to Oz and all of the bits with the Wicked Witch, and I forget some of like the parts of the adventures. So if you haven't read this for a while, go back, because there's so many little sections, little adventures, side quests that just make this book magical, and show this beautiful imagination that Baum has given to us. And yeah, it's great, and it's also an awesome sort of early chapter book for younger children. So if you've got children around the 5-ish, 5, 6, 7, then I would say this is a great sort of chapter book to read to them, or if they're advanced readers, they could read it to themselves. Charlie's definitely not there. But yeah, I just loved revisiting this world, and yeah, I think Charlie really enjoyed the fact that the Tin Woodman, in my rendition, had a very strong Irish accent. Yes, it may not have always been Irish, but that was the intent. And my first book, my favourite book of the 10 that I'm reviewing today, is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, which is also a reread for me. So I read this for the FOMO book club, which I ran with Jack from Spread Book Joy. I'll leave the live discussion that we have below. It is spoiler filled, so if you haven't read it yet, then definitely don't head there. But yes, this was the second time I read this. I read this for the first time when I was a teenager, and I remember loving it when I read it before. But I also think that when I was younger, I didn't really have my own opinions in the same way that I do now. I knew that To Kill a Mockingbird was my dad's favourite book. I knew that my mum, or one of my dad's favourite books, I knew that my mum loved it. I knew that it was critically acclaimed, that everybody loved this book. And so going into it now in my 30s, I was concerned that when I'd read it before and loved it, that maybe I was just going with the flow, that I was just thinking everyone loves this book, so I love this book. That definitely wasn't the case. I loved this book so much on a reread. It really stood up, and I definitely feel like I got different things out of it the second time I read it. So if you don't know, I'm really scrabbling at my door. What's the matter, boy? To Kill a Mockingbird is about a white family in the South, in the States. A man and his 2 children. He is a single father, which is quite rare at the time. And a black man is accused of raping a white woman. And we kind of see this, and Atticus Finch, the father, is appointed as the lawyer to defend this man. So we then see what happens to the town, to the children, to this family, as racial tensions stir throughout the town. What I found was that I was a lot more focused this time round on reading it, not on the overall plot around race and injustice, though obviously that was an important part of the book, but I found it really interesting to analyse and read and understand the relationship between the 2 children, Jem and Scout, and to really look at the way things affected them and their morals and how they were raised quite differently to other children, and the way that they interacted with each other, and this sort of sibling bond that Harper Lee created, which was so exquisite. These amazing side characters that sort of come in and add different layers to the book. And yeah, I just got something completely different out of it the second time I read it. And if you have read this book before, but it's been a while, I would recommend going back to it, because I think looking at it, certainly if you read it like me when you were a young adult or teenager, I think looking at it through an adult's eyes is really different to looking at it through a young person's eyes. And yeah, it was a brilliant experience. It was a brilliant reread. I hardly ever reread books, but I'm really glad I reread this one. So that is it. That is the 10 books that I wanted to talk to you guys about today. I would love to know if you've read any, if you are thinking of reading any, because I've talked about them. I will be coming to you with another recent reads probably quite soon, so I'm quite far behind with them. But I am only going to be reviewing on recent reads books that I haven't reviewed elsewhere. So if I've done solo reviews, I won't review them in recent reads, so you don't have to see me talk about the same books again and again. If you are looking for a great book that I haven't discussed today, I will leave my review for A Story of a Heart by Rachel Clark here, which I reviewed recently. I definitely urge you to head over to that and have a look at that review if you're looking for some great non-fiction. And I will see you all very soon with another one. Bye guys.